Hello all, Zyceres here. We are updating the tier list that I make for the Decayed Hope sector this time, where I do this as like a retrospective on each sector as we finish them. This sector has about 9 days left in it. So that's what we're doing in these current videos. Uh, Before we go into the actual tier list itself, let's just quickly go over how I do split up the tiers. So I split up the tiers into a number of categories, with the S tier being the ones that I think are too polarizing, too strong. These are things that I think deserve any nerfs that they get. They're uh, generally going to overperform versus basically everything, and they don't really leave space for other items to exist. The A tier is probably still above the curve. I don't really think these things are balanced, but they're not so much above the curve that they would be a problem. Like, these are things that you want to be careful with nerfing. Big nerfs will probably make them too weak, and the like they can kind of exist in the state that they're in, and it's not. They will probably be used a lot more often, but they're not going to like truly overtake the meta in any form, similar to how, say, Plasma Sentinels did early on, or the Spontaneous Cubes did last sector. Uh, Next up is B. Anything in B I think is actually balanced. Generally, I consider B to be the first of the balanced tiers. I think that things in B are balanced and feel good. C, I think they're probably reasonably balanced, but there's some clunkiness or something that's like holding them back from actually like feeling pretty good in whatever aspect they are in. Uh, for D, I think these things are a little bit undertuned. So it's like the flip side of like the A tier, where these things are, I think, below the curve and they don't really feel right. Um, and they, you don't want to be like super generous with buff. You wouldn't want to be super generous with buffs with them, but they probably do need something to put them above, back up into the like more balanced tiers. And F, anything in F is fundamentally failed, I would say. They have really big issues. They need something big to really like even possibly like completely being reworked, or like huge impactful new mod augments, upgrade change, whatever. They need something to really be usable. You would only really, I feel like you'd only really use F for the most part to be contrarian. But anyway, let's get into the tier list. Okay, so let's start with the biolinks. There hasn't been particularly big changes to any of the biolinks. None of them got any balance changes in any of the patches. There's no major bugs, similar to last sector, so this is going to look very similar to the last sector's ones, but we're going to go through it anyway. Let's start with the Ironside. So the Ironside biolinks we're starting with Magnetic Link. Magnetic Link I'm putting in the A tier. It's a very good perk. It increases your range of your pickup from 4 meters to 6 meters, which means you can pick up through walls, because walls are about because a solid cube is 4 meters on each edge. That's useful in general. Also means you can pick up from corrosion cubes without having to actually dip into them. It's good for all ranged weapons. It's just a solid biolink, but it's not really anything that's like super broken in any case, I don't think. It technically it allows you to have more ammo, but like the 4 meter is default range is generally good enough for that anyway. It's only adding just a little bit to that, and yeah, it's not really super oppressive. Shot tracker goes into C. This allows you to see your ammo at, I believe it's a 40-meter range or something. It's something ridiculous. Um, Very good range. The the reason I put it in C, and like generally uh depends on the weapon for whether it's like actually useful or not. Like if this is more useful in Demo Cannon and the Plasma Bow than it is on the Volt Lancer, because the Volt Lancer bolts are actually fairly easy to track because they stick into things. But the like if you ricochet a Plasma Bolt or if you just fire a Demo Cannon because the Demo Cannons never stick to anything, they the shot tracker becomes a lot more useful. The reason I don't put it higher, put it in the actual balanced tier, is because it can actually be really hard to see the pings from this, even though it is through walls and whatnot. It is actually, yeah, difficult to actually see them sometimes because you have to actually like scan the like full 360 circle around you, and that can be a problem. Um, I just wish there was some like easier way to uh like locate where the pings are. And the last one for the Ironside is the rapid fire. It goes into B. Uh, it just makes things fire faster. It's never really like the most necessary biolink in any situation, but it's also never a bad biolink. 20% fire fastering on any ranged weapon is good enough for a biolink slot. Which makes it pretty good for a biolink that it does strictly increase the power of your weapons. And there is a little bit of a trade-off because like if you're firing faster using more ammo and ammo is limited and there are very strict limits in this game as opposed to other games where you may just never worry about ammo ever. Uh, you might note that none of these have changed from the last sector. As I said, earlier, there's been no balance changes to the biolinks, and there's no pressures from the new traps and guards and weapons to really modify anything related to the Ironside suit. So, let's go on to the next. For the Kamaitachi suit, let's start with Frenzy, which will go into B. Frenzy is a reasonably good perk, it gives you a speed boost when you need it. I don't generally like movement speed bonuses because they don't affect your grapple reel-in speed, and your like standing still, grappling, and then letting it reel you in is faster than is it the equivalent of about a 50% movement speed bonus, and this only gives like 25. But because the standard gameplay will be you will hit your lunge, which will get your melee attack, and then you will move as you set up the next grapple, you will gain some extra distance on that movement as the grapple travels. So like that's the one situation that you will never have a grapple. And that's exactly when this fires, and so the short duration is basically non-existent because it'll cover like 100% of your walking time, assuming you're playing more into the grapple to move faster, which you should generally be doing. The the risk of moving faster is definitely like can be counterbalanced with skill. So yeah, just going faster is generally better. Next up we have Gap Closer. Gap Closer goes into C. It's kind of awkward because without other reasons, you don't really want to be stuck in the lunge animation for longer because being stuck in an animation is quite awkward. Uh, it is nice to be able to swing and get your lunge in from further away, but the default lunge speed of 15 meters per second is the same as the grapple, which means that lunges inherently don't have value without you doing something else for them. Um, which is why I put Gap Closer in C, because if you aren't getting your value from somewhere, which you can get, like, so for instance, the Fury's Edge can get some of that value from the fact that you can deflect while lunging. So having a longer lunge animation means that you're more likely to get a deflect if you do go for a lunge into a deflect, which is nice, but the better way to get value is just play quick strikes, which we'll throw in now. Quick strike is I put into B tier. It is it is what gives the lunge its value. The melee like the only thing that melee has that is better than ranged is the fact that it can move you from point A to point B and thus trigger your um, and not thus it can move you from point A to point B relatively safely a lot of the time, get your hit in, and the the way you can do that and actually be safe is because of quick strike, which lowers the time pretty significantly on how long you're stuck in the animation. Because you don't really want to be stuck in that animation, you want to be at the end of that animation where you've already done what you were intending to do. And quick strike at 55% lunge speed, that's insane, insanely fast. It is still the fastest way to move in the game. Even the wheel and speed enhancements don't quite get to the 55% of quick strikes. Obviously, quick strikes are somewhat limited though because of where you can travel and your attack delays on your swords. But yeah, that's still that's what keeps it in B, why it's balanced rather than, potentially being full overpowered. The Nautilus suit would be the one that is most likely to have changed because the Lodestar has been added, but spoiler, the Lodestar is not particularly good, so it doesn't really change the like top end of the Nautilus biolinks. Uh, this one here is Countercharge, which is the perfect block effect biolink. It goes into the S tier. It is insane that it changes the perfect block effect on the arc barrier from adding 0.5 seconds to adding 2 seconds. So it goes from um, so it's 1 second active time by default. Perfect block 1.5 by default, but 3 with. That's insane. It still adds more percentage uptime to your arc barrier than the other than Surge Override, despite the fact that Surge Override is like um insanely high number. It's an insanely high number. Uh, but yeah, the next one down would be Block Lock, which goes into the B tier. Block Lock increases the perfect block window, and it's quite substantial boost. It is generally better to just not run this and try and get the perfect block anyway, because you can do that by just timing it better. But it's still a pretty strong biolink on the arc barrier in particular because the getting those perfect blocks is really important, particularly with the counter charge biolink that we just talked about, and like it's still going to be up there. I generally will run I'll generally run the other two and then swap this one out for something else because it's the most suspect of them as the Surge Override goes into here. But it's still very good, and there is a case for it and Countercharge. But I think for now, it's still good. It's just not as good as the other Nautilus biolinks, and you just generally need to find a biolink from something other than the Nautilus to most of the time. There's at least one you need elsewhere for your other weapon. Surge Override goes into A. It's very good. It's actually very good on both shields. This is the only one that I think is like necessary for the um, Lodestar shield, but more on that in the actual weapon tier list. The main thing here is that it is an insane increase in the percentage uptime for the arc barrier, and it is a very important breakpoint on the Lodestar. The I think if it was just the breakpoint thing and wasn't also the really important. The like really big percentage increase on the arc barrier, I think it probably would drop down to B, in my mind, but because it is both, it stays up in A. Uh, the main thing is that the cooldown time, how cooldown times work is inconsistent between the two shields. The arc barrier cools down the moment that you use the barrier, and the lodestar cools down from the moment that the shield ends. Um, if they were both shield ends, which I think would be the more reasonable way to go about it, I think that this would be a much more balanced Biolink while still having a fairly similar effect. The biggest problem with this is a degenerate playstyle that doesn't genuinely get played, where you use like the epic uh, shields up, I think it's called, the increased active time effect of defensive weapons, alongside the arc barrier and the countercharge and surge override biolinks, and then you can have a 98% uptime. And if you wanted to guarantee that you get all the perfect blocks, you can do that with a demo cannon, and then you can like live in a corrosive cube because the corrosive cube can't kill you in the 0.1 second out of every 5 that you are actually vulnerable, which is crazy. Um, it doesn't generally see play. I don't think it would be especially fun to do, but it is these two biolinks that facilitate that, and that is probably the most overpowered thing that you can do in Meet Your Maker. So they get fairly high tiers because of that. Okay, Overseer. Overseer biolinks are relatively straightforward. They also haven't changed much. The slipstreamer goes into B. It allows you to extend how long you maintain the speed from the grapple, which means that you can move it faster for longer. It's great. It's great. It's very useful. You can definitely feel the lack of it when you aren't playing it and you're used to it. It is generally, um, it it's hard to find space a lot of the time because there are quite a few very good biolinks, and this is like actually a good movement biolink, um, as opposed to some of the other movement speed bonuses like the enhancement, wouldn't actually work quite as well as this one does for getting to where you need to be quicker. Pathfinder goes into A. This also hasn't moved. None of these have moved because the Overseer hasn't really been affected by anything. Seeing the Harvey path helps you get through the map quicker, helps you deal with mazes, just helps you know where to go so you don't have to like die to work out which corner it's going in, and if Harvey happens to like sneak off into a weird spot, this will help you know that. 12 meters is far enough that you can sometimes spot a skip, but most of the time you kind of just follow it from some level of distance. You can just like keep up where it is, and yeah, it's very good. It's probably a little bit too good because you're able to just completely bypass a lot of setups because like you know exactly where to go, which means you don't have to second guess, which means you don't have to clear a room and then work it out. You can just follow the line, and yeah, there's a lot of things that it could be changed to make this a little bit more fair. And I don't personally run it, and it's not because I think it's overpowered. It's just that I think that I would save more time a lot of the time running other biolinks, because I have a very strong grasp of where Harvey can go and can thus generally work out the direction I need to go. And the last one is Scavenger. Scavenger saves you seconds out of a raid when anything else could save you deaths, or which would be minutes. Um, it only lets you see where the tombs are, and the tombs are not even like super high value when it comes to resource farming. Like finishing another map would generally be better than finding an extra tomb. But yeah, uh, vaguely useful maybe for the biggest problem is that it's the distance that you can see the tombs is about where you can hear them anyway. But like if there was something else that we could see with this, maybe it'd have more value, but at the moment there's not, so there isn't, and yeah, Scavenger just continues to languish in this F tier. It's just not a good biolink. You only master it so that you can get rid of it. So overall, there hasn't been any changes here. There's been no specific balance changes, and I don't think the Lodestar particularly changes my evaluation on anything Nautilus related. And the uh, everything else that was added was a trap or a guard was build decided. So and none of them are like particularly weak or strong against any of these. So yeah, they're just kind of stayed the same. Um, Not super exciting, but it's going to happen sometimes, I feel. Hopefully going forward we get full arsenal packs whenever there's a new sector so that there's at least new stuff. But this is the one section that does not have a new thing this sector.